folks. Welcome to another edition, episode 2 of This Week in Hockey East. Great to be with you, along with Bridget Prue. I'm Eric Galanti. We're going to jump right in with our college hockey game of the week on Nesson this week. It is the Maine Black Bears, the defending Hockey East champs, traveling to Quinnipiac for a 2-game series against the Bobcats. And we're so glad to be joined by the head coach of the Maine Black Bears. That is Ben Barr, who's nice enough to join us. Coach, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
There's a lot of things that we could talk about to start, but just because we were talking about it before we came on, you were looking for a new place in your new building, new offices, new everything, the renovations that are going on at Alfond Arena. Why don't you tell us where things stand with that, as that's obviously a huge part as you guys begin this season.
Yeah, we opened the renovation up a couple weeks ago, and obviously played our first games here last weekend. It's better than anything I would have ever imagined. So it's an exciting time to be up here right now, and still working out the kinks with the lights in our offices and stuff, which is why I was a little bright in my office, so I moved. But other than that, we're pretty fortunate. Brand new locker room, weight room, medical facility, concourse for the rink and everything. So hopefully you guys come up some point this year and get a chance to check it out.
You're coming into this season as the defending Hockey East champions, and obviously there's normally a different message that comes along with that, because now you're the team that's defending rather than trying to go out there. You kind of have a little bit of an extra target on you normally in that kind of situation. How do you manage the expectations of this team? What's the message to your team this season?
Yeah, it's been, we have so many new players on our team that it almost feels like we're just trying to find ourselves all over again. And I don't imagine that's much different for most teams across the nation. So, trying to rely on past successes to have any, indication of how things are going to go this year is a trap that we're, it really doesn't. I don't even think it enters our world at this point. We have so much work to do to become and find our identity as a team this year that, that was all good. And, obviously those are good moments that we'll take with us for a long time down the road. But we have a lot of work to do as a team to find our identity here to try to have success, in our current year.
Ben, you mentioned some of the turnover, and it feels like everyone in college hockey now, rather than 6 or 7 new guys you're dealing with, it's 10 to 15 new guys for everyone. You obviously lose some key guys from last year, some key core guys. What has been the process of replacing and finding the new leadership with this year's group?
Yeah, it's just, we've been going through it here the last couple of weeks. We played an exhibition game a couple weekends ago, and it looked like we never practiced before. So we were, last week was a little bit better. And, obviously we're going to have to be even better to go on the road and play a fantastic Quinnipiac team and, in their barn. So, for us, it's just, trying to understand what is, winning hockey and what isn't, with all the new faces. And, they've been extremely coachable, and, we have a good group of core veterans back. Thomas Field, Brandon Holt, our senior captains, that those guys are, they've been here through thick and thin. So we're relying on those guys a lot to help us with this process, because, that's going to be I think the challenge for everybody. It's nice to have all these, talented players, a lot of CHL players that were never eligible. That's great. But, the teams that find their identity and figure out how to play a solid brand of hockey as quickly as possible are the ones that are probably going to benefit the most.
I want to ask you about your goaltender, Alvin Boya. He was a big part of the team last year. He's got some NHL interest. He was at the Bruins development camp this year. What makes him such a special goalie?
He's just really mentally focused. He's pretty fiery. So he wants to win. He wants to win. He wants to succeed. He cares about his teammates. He cares about the University of Maine. That's what we're trying to get with all of our student athletes. And, he's one of those guys that, he's out there he's always trying to push the envelope and get a little bit better. And that's, we ask that from all of our guys. And, when it starts in net, and, obviously Alfie's done a great job with him and our goalie and our other goalies as well. it's a real calming presence for us back there. And he was that this past weekend, and I'm sure he will be going forward.
Ben, obviously a game from Justin Poirier in his first game, having a hat trick obviously stands out. But as you mentioned, the CHL guy coming in from the queue, it's going to have a seismic impact on college hockey. We know that, but especially for you guys from your proximity to a lot of these leagues that all of a sudden are eligible. What has been the thing that you guys have kind of noticed as you've started to go through this process of bringing in some CHL guys and the impact you think like it could potentially have on your program?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, I think, 8 on our team. So we have, quite a few CHL players from, really the 3 different CHL leagues. And every one of them, I think, has had a different experience. The 20-year-olds that were aging out of juniors, it's maybe a little bit of a different mentality than some of the younger guys like, Justin Poirier, Miguel Marcus, some of the guys that, made that jump, maybe a year or two before they had to. So it's, sometimes you take for granted when you're, the things have been the same way for so long in college hockey as far as where we recruit players, whether it's the USHL or BCHL or North American League. And now you've added these other leagues that are now eligible. But, the thing that you take for granted a little bit is that most of the players that are playing in those traditional college development leagues, they understand what they're getting into. And some of these CHL players, it was never been on their radar until 4 or 5 months ago. And so that's been the thing, just making sure we're aware of, some of the different, obviously the school piece of it. There's some culture shock with it sometimes, depending on where a student athlete is coming from. So, we've been working through that with our guys, and some of them it's been easy, no problem. And some of them there's been ups and downs, but as long as they're willing to talk about it and work through it and get a little bit better every day, which all of our guys have been. We found that it's been a really positive experience so far. Obviously, we're only a couple weeks in, but if they're playing at their best, obviously they're going to help a lot. Our team and many other teams that brought CHL players in as well.
And lastly, Coach, just what are you expecting and hoping to get out of this matchup against Quinnipiac?
Well, I mean, that's just a really tough early season matchup to go on the road and play one of the best teams in the nation in their rink. So it's going to be a lot different challenge than than we had this past weekend. Playing at the Alfond is always a huge advantage to us, and going on the road is definitely always a challenge anywhere, but especially playing a team that's as well coached, as talented as Quinnipiac. So it'd be a great challenge for us, and we'll have to be much better than we were last weekend.
It's a couple of crazy games last year, Ben. Wouldn't expect much different this weekend. Good luck. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
That's Ben Barr, the head coach of Maine. Looking forward to their game this weekend against Quinnipiac, and looking forward to talking plenty more of Hockey East. That's all coming up on This Week in Hockey East.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. It's time to go around Hockey East, presented by Boston Harbor Hotel. Plan your fall getaway today at bostonharborhotel.com and experience Boston's best waterfront views. Eric, it's time for us to talk about some of the men's matchups this week. We have a top 5 matchup to talk about between BU and Michigan State. But first, let's take a look at the polls. We have 6 of the top 14 teams in the USCHO.com poll as Hockey East teams.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Boston University jumps up to number 1. It felt like everyone who was up there had some sort of blemish last weekend. So BU, who did not lose, they tied on Saturday to Colgate. They're the number 1 spot. Then you see Maine, who we talked about. We'll talk more about that Maine-Quinnipiac game as we go through. Nice bounce-back weekend for Boston College, and then UMass, UConn, Providence. We're going to talk about all these teams. But what a week for Boston University, right? They're number 1 in the country. 2 alums inked some massive contracts in the NHL, right? Jack Eichel and Lane Hudson both getting 8-year deals. And they are playing this massive matchup with Michigan State for 2 games at home starting on Friday night at Agganis. Bridget, you've seen the Terriers up close for a couple of games now. Let's talk about what stands out with them.
Yeah, so they got their first win against LIU. They got a win and a shootout win against Colgate last weekend. I think this is going to be their biggest test so far. This is the first ranked opponent they're going to play this season. And not only are they ranked, they were just the number 2 team, now the number 3 team in the country. And so in that last game against Colgate, you kind of saw them get away from their details a little bit. There was a little bit of sloppiness, and they're going to have to really clean that up in order to beat a team like the Spartans. For BU, the good news is you're already seeing the chemistry form. Ryder Ritchie and Cole Eiserman play off each other really well already. Ritchie's just a freshman, Eiserman a sophomore, and they both have such offensive minds. They can both make plays. They can both score. I asked Jay Pandolfo about it after this weekend. He said, yeah, they have really good chemistry and they're working, winning their pucks. And when their details are good, they're really good players. They're both very gifted offensively. Ryder can make plays, and we know he can put the puck in the back of the net. So when you're doing those things right, it's fun to watch them. And I'll add in Cole Hudson, who once again has been productive from the blue line for Boston University. All three of those guys, Ritchie, Eiserman, and Hudson, all averaging over 1.5 points per game this season so far through just 3 games. And BU has really an abundance of offensive weapons, I would say. Not just those top line guys, but the bottom 6 players have been producing as well. Last weekend, we saw first career goals for 4 different BU players, including some freshmen, John Morello, Jack Murtagh, and junior Mick Frechette. They all scored. They're all in the bottom 6, so there's been some depth scoring as well. There's one player, too, that I feel like we haven't seen a lot of yet, and that's Sasha Boisvert. He's a transfer in from North Dakota. He suffered a minor upper body injury in BU's exhibition game 2 weeks ago. He came in and played a little bit Saturday, felt like something was just off. He said he felt good in warmups, but then he started to feel bad during the game and thought he might be hurting the team. So he took himself out of that competition. But he was the top line center going into that weekend. And he's somebody that we know can score as well, the NCHC Rookie of the Year last year.
Yeah, I think the thing with BU is we saw like the high and the potential on Friday, and then you see some of that consistency thing come up on Saturday. And the great thing about covering Jay Pandolfo teams is like we don't have to make up something like what he's thinking, because he says it. He says exactly what he's thinking and his post game. And he was really disappointed with how things went on Saturday. But obviously, it's easier to be that coming out of a win or in a tie and not a loss, and doing so in October. So, he's confident it'll come along, but that's something that we talked about a lot with BU last year. It's certainly something it looks like we may be talking about early this year, but we'll see against this Michigan State team. The other thing was the power play, right? Eiserman, 3 power play goals in 3 games, that'll play, right? But the ceiling Friday, again, a little bit of a struggle Saturday, but again, as Jay said, it's October, sky's not falling. Michigan State's here though, and this is such a good challenge, right? We keep saying this, but it's just so great that we get these matchups early in the season, that we get these type of games. National audience for this one. It's going to be interesting to watch this Michigan State team, which again, ton of high-end talent, just like Boston University, similar styles. But it's interesting because they're certainly not infallible, right? Because we saw what UNH did to Michigan State last weekend.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the highlight too. This is against UNH. It ends up being a Marty Lavin's game-winning goal with 5 seconds left in regulation. So UNH starts out the season with this big emotional win against the then number 2 team in the country. And I guess we can talk a little bit about UNH here as well, because they have this crossover, and with Michigan State starting against 2 different Hockey East opponents, it kind of transitions nicely. And we look at how they were able to use their power play against Michigan State to be successful. They were 2 for 5, including a goal by Morgan Winters on the power play. He scored twice in that game. And he's this week's Service Credit Union scoring leader. Silas Clark got a power play goal as well. And also, to take a look at their goaltending this year, what a UNH debut for Kyle Chevette. He's a Union transfer. He was 3rd-team All-ECAC last year. He had 34 saves in that win, 36 saves the following night in the 2-0 loss. He's somebody to keep an eye on for them as well. They get Merrimack to open Hockey East play this weekend.
Yeah, one other team I want to talk about in terms of the Hockey East games is there is one Friday, UMass taking on Northeastern out in Amherst. Let's just spend some time on this UMass team, because the thought coming into the year about UMass was it was the opposite of last year, right? Last year, we weren't quite sure about the defense core early because it was young. We kind of trusted what the forward group would be. This year, the forward group's really young. Greg Carvel loves the depth of it, but it's young and it's untested. Well, so far, they're 3-0. We've already seen them have 70-plus shots in the game against Northern Michigan in the opener. And then you look at first-round pick Vaslav Nestrashil. He's been awesome so far, a first round pick of Chicago. And you look at what he's done, a hat trick against Stonehill last time out, 4 goals so far in his 3 games on 19 shots. He's a big freshman, 6'6". So there's that adjustment period, but he's looked very good so far. You combine that with Jack Musa, who, was really good last year. So it's certainly not a surprise, but 3 goals, 7 points so far. Greg Carville called him as good a forward as he's ever had at UMass. He's making plays faster. The puck is on and off his stick so quickly, as much as any player he's had. We could go on and on and on. Michael Hrabel should be pretty steady in net. So, yeah, there's some youth up front for UMass. And it's really interesting how they're going to be tested, right? They've started with some really big games early in the Greg Carville era. This year's a little bit different. It's a little bit of a slower build into the schedule. Now they get Northeastern and then Bentley on Saturday. Then you look at what they have coming up. It's at Omaha, Cornell, Maine, BC, Providence as their next 5 weekends. So it's been pretty impressive what we've seen from them so far. And now they're going to start to ratchet up to a totally different level. They'll take on a Northeastern team looking to bounce back from a loss to Army in their opening weekend. The other thing with UMass, the power play has been really good. 4 power play goals in the first 2 games. When UMass is going right, their power play is usually going right. We've seen that so far. So I'm really interested to see what we get for UMass as they get into Hockey East play this weekend.
Yeah, a lot of really good Hockey East men's matchups. We'll take you through the women's matchups next, and also kind of look back at what the key moments have been for them so far. So stay tuned for that, as well as our preview for the Maine Quinnipiac game right here on NESN. Let's go around Hockey East, presented by Boston Children's Hospital, and look at some of the women's action so far. I think it's perfect to start out with Northeastern. Notably, they've gotten off to a perfect start. They have 2 wins over RIT, a 6-2 win over RPI, and then a 4-0 shutout over Providence in their only conference game so far. The Huskies have only allowed 4 goals in those 4 games, and some of that thanks to sophomore goaltender Lisa Janssen. She was in net for the shutout. She returns for her sophomore season after a fantastic freshman year. She was the National Goalie of the Year semifinalist, and she had 7 shutouts last year, which was the most of any freshman goalie. She also had the best save percentage, which is 938 save percentage, and the best goals against average, which is 161 goals against average for any freshman in the country. And they also add freshman goaltender Rena Trambecki, who made her first career start in goal against RPI last week, allowing just 1 goal on 12 shots in the win. So this is maybe another goalie find for head coach Dave Flint, who always seems to find these great goaltenders. And Northeastern's offense was on display as well. Jersey Mike's a sub above player of the week. Lily Shannon had 6 points. She had 2 goals and 4 assists in the 2 wins for Northeastern last weekend. And this week's series for them against number 7 Quinnipiac will be a good test just to see how solid this Northeastern women's team is this year.
Yeah, I think so. They were off to a very nice start. Be interesting to see how they do. One other notable performance. How about Vermont last weekend? This week they'll be competing at the Icebreaker. But what a special set of results, right? They go on the road to number 12 St. Lawrence last weekend. Friday night, they score a late goal in the final 5 seconds for a 1-1 tie against a ranked team. Ellie Simmons made 33 saves in the effort. And then Saturday, they turn around an overtime win, 2-1. First ever win at St. Lawrence for Vermont, and they post that weekend on the road. So pretty impressive stuff for Vermont. They've played all ranked teams so far. Their first 5 games are going to be against ranked teams. They also played a couple of, games against Penn State where they lost both, but made it closer at the end. So really interesting to see what we get from this Vermont team with this challenging start. Also want to note Boston College swept their opening series in Hockey East play. Ava Thomas, 10 points now in 3 games. BC and Cornell is part of a weekend slate where Hockey East plays 6 ranked opponents this weekend.
When we come back, we'll dive into this weekend's top 10 matchup between Maine and Quinnipiac. Can Maine stay undefeated? We'll discuss that next on This Week in Hockey East.
Maine and Quinnipiac is our big matchup coming up Friday night, 7 o'clock on NESN. Bridget, let's talk a little bit more about Maine. We talked with Ben Barr earlier. This Black Bears team's picking up right where they left off last year.
Yeah, they have a perfect first weekend of the season. They sweep Holy Cross. It was a 5-2 win for the Black Bears on Friday, and then a 6-0 shutout on Saturday, with Justin Poirier getting a hat trick in his debut. So already off to a good start for his collegiate career. One player I want to bring up, who I did ask Ben about in our interview, was Albin Boya, because I think that he is going to be one of the best goalies in college hockey again. So he's important to bring up. My question is, can Albin Boya have an even stronger season than last year and push for a Richter Award? He was a finalist for the award last year. He had the fifth best goals against average in the country and the fifth most wins. And he was a big part of Maine's run to the Hockey East Championship. He was named the MVP of the tournament. So to me, a lot of success early on in this season, too, while the team gets its footing and while, as Ben mentioned, they try to integrate a lot of new players. It's going to be important for Albin Boya to be calm in the net and kind of backstop the early part of this season.
And the reality is, if Jacob Fowler doesn't have the year that he does, which was literally one of the three best goalie seasons in hockey's history, then Albin Boya is winning most of, if not all, these awards last year. So he certainly has the potential to do it here this year. This is a challenging matchup, though, and I think we're going to learn a lot about this Maine team. It feels like every coach you talk to when they play Quinnipiac, they come away saying you're going to learn a lot about your team when you face a team like them. They're so good structurally. They're usually so good in October. Last year was kind of out of the ordinary for them, that they struggled. But, really nice win against BC on the road. Did have a tough loss at the Icebreaker, but then they bounced out back in a massive way against Notre Dame. So they should be firing on all cylinders, excited to get home. One thing that stands out for this matchup, though, Maine just played Holy Cross and Bill Riga, who was Rand Pecknold's longtime assistant for Quinnipiac. So they play a very similar style. So Quinnipiac, which can be a little bit different than what we see in Hockey East, but Maine just saw it for 2 games against Holy Cross. So that's something to note with this particular matchup. Should be a lot of fun against Quinnipiac this weekend for 2. Before we wrap up, want to get to some quick hitter fun stories that we saw across Hockey East this week. Bridget, I know you want to talk about something that happened out in Minnesota.
Yeah, this is something that people in the area are interested in, because Dean Letourneau is a Bruins prospect. Fun story, he finally got his first collegiate goal last weekend in BU's second game of this season. He's such a big, powerful, just large center, and you see him finally get that goal. And it's really just good for him to get it out of the way early in this season so it doesn't linger and follow him around as the year goes on. So maybe he can just breathe a sigh of relief. He gets his first.
Yeah, I think the thing that obviously folks are looking for the scoring, because the 0 last year stands out. But I think folks know the story at this point. He came in a year early to Boston College when Will Smith left early for the NHL, coming directly to college from St. Andrews, so not taking the USHL path. Whatever the decision was, the thing that we've seen so far is he looks much, much stronger. And not just that, but he's using his strength in a way that's allowing him to anticipate earlier and get to some of those offensive skills, which is the reason he's drafted first overall. So I think that's a really good sign. The other thing I just wanted to mention, again, you look at where we are right now. After Saturday, we're already going to have seen 19 matchups against 2 ranked teams this year in college hockey. A bunch of them lost early last week. We already saw Western Michigan go down as number 1. They're playing Lowell this week. We already saw 3 and 4 go down. So a couple of big matchups. It should be so much fun. We can't wait to talk about it as we talk all year long with This Week in Hockey East. Appreciate you joining us here today. Enjoy some truly outstanding matchups across the league this week. For Bridget Prue, I'm Eric Galanti, and we will talk to you next time on This Week in Hockey East.